Okay, let's take a look at a typical flight condition. Let's supposing we're in a high-speed cruise at 90 knots, 500 feet AGL. This is what the stored energy picture would look like for your helicopter. In your rotor RPM, you would have approximately 100 horsepower seconds of energy stored that could be recovered. There's about 200 horsepower seconds stored there, but half of it is below rotor stall. It's there, but you can't use it, so there's no point in counting it. It's kind of like the altitude below ground level. It's there, but you can't get to it, so you might as well forget it. In my airspeed at 90 knots, I have 800 horsepower seconds of energy. And in my altitude, AGL, 500 feet, I have 1,100 horsepower seconds of energy. I actually have the most stored in my altitude. But the problem with altitude energy is that it is very slow to turn on, very slow to turn off. The pilot does not have the quick, precise control over the recovery of altitude energy that he has over the recovery of airspeed energy. So I have a total now of about 2,000 horsepower seconds of energy stored. Now let's assume that a student who is an airplane pilot, poorly trained, had a power failure under these flight conditions and did everything wrong. Let's supposing that after that power failure he did not allow his airspeed to change and he did not allow his altitude to change. And that could happen. As an airplane pilot, he was taught that if he had an engine failure, the one thing you must never give up is your airspeed. So he may go forward with that cyclic stick to preserve that airspeed. And if the terrain below him is rather untenable, he may be very reluctant to give up that altitude. So if he did not allow either his airspeed or his altitude to change, then he would not get any energy from airspeed nor any energy from altitude. Because to get energy from those storage bins, you must allow them to change. In that case, all of the energy that would be required would have to come from his rotor RPM, where he only has 100 horsepower seconds stored. As you recall back on that power required curve, under this flight condition, the rotor is demanding about 90 horsepower. So 90 horsepower divided into 100 horsepower seconds of energy means that he would lose his RPM and stall his rotor in about 1.1 seconds. Just a little over 1 second, that RPM could go all the way down and end up stalling that rotor. Now, 1 second is about as long as it takes me to say 1001. So in a period of time, as long as it takes me to say 1001 in that period of time, that student could have lost his RPM, stalled his rotor, and been killed. On the other hand, if he entered a normal auto rotation, and let's assume that throughout that normal auto rotation, the power required is going to vary from 90 horsepower down to 60 horsepower, back up to 90 horsepower, or in other words, an average of about 75 horsepower. Then I could divide the 75 horsepower into 2,000 horsepower seconds of energy, and that would give me approximately 26 seconds before he would have used up all of his energy beyond the ground with his collectors pulled in and have completed a normal, successful auto rotation.